the Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. With your hosts, Joe Bond and AJ Applegarth.
Touchdown! All right. Welcome to the Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. With me, as usual, my co-host, AJ Applegarth. What's going on, man?
Tired.
Yeah. Surprise, everybody. We're here on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And surprise, Mike. We're here on Wednesday, our producer, who probably forgot that we were doing the show tonight. So for those of you who weren't planning on tuning in tonight, thanks for being here. It was a little joke we had before the show, but anyway. All right, so tonight we're going to be jumping into the NFC South Draft Guide. We are almost done with these. Next to last one is tonight. We've got a couple of great guests helping us out, but before we jump into that, I want to remind and ask you guys to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave those 5-star reviews, comment while you're here. We appreciate it. We love hearing from you. And, of course, jump over to fantasysixpack.net/plan to become an all-access member. You're going to get access to our award-winning rankings, our draft cheat sheet tool, our season projections. During the season, we've got all of our DFS content as well. And, of course, the best part about it is you get to jump over to our Discord and talk to all of us and ask all of your league-specific questions and get all the advice you need to dominate. So that's where it's at. And right now we're running a promo, F6P NFL 24 for 15% off. So make sure you hit that up. And AJ, you and I are in the Fantrax College Fantasy Football League. That's pretty sweet, dude. I'm having fun doing that for sure. So I got our boy Kyron Drones.
I know. I was very tempted to just snake him from you because I knew
you knew I was gonna go get him.
I was like, I don't really know as many people anymore.
I literally don't know nobody, which is why I'm doing the league. And it's great. I love it over there.
I like it. It's I mean, I'm not surprised that there's also, some solid information for these players. Some of it is still from, the bowl games and whatnot because the season hasn't really started and, they're just getting practices and stuff underway, if anything. So it's still great, though. I mean, it's just the same, base setup that Fantrax has for baseball, for football, NFL football. So great platform. Definitely recommend checking it out. And if you're into college football, definitely jump on and get one of these leagues going. It's, I'm just excited to be in it right now, and it's getting me excited for college football again. So.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, Fantrax is the place to play. If you want to create your own league, go over to fantrax.com/fantasy6pack and create your free league today. It's great stuff. But let's jump into things here and get to our guests for the night. Chris Allen from Fantasy Life. How's it going, man?
What's going on, boys? We got the Expo coming up here in a few days. Draft season is we are in the thick of it right now. Training camp news. We're being reminded about how much injuries suck. And we haven't even seen an actual down of football. That honestly, that's when I knew football was back, was when we all started panicking over injuries. I was like, well, now this is it. We're back. We're back, baby. But no, happy to be here with you guys, man. It's been too long since we've been able to catch up, but I'll be more than happy to grab a few drinks with all of you, once we get into Ohio here in the next couple of days.
Yeah, sadly, it's just going to be me and
not be able
and our
to.
Second guest.
No, AJ, I thought you were coming too, man.
Oh man, I had to pull the trigger and bail out last minute.
Oh, that's tough, bro.
Yeah, it sucks. Work's just crushing me right now. Life's crushing me right now. So, too much stuff going on, and
what's going on, Jamie? Jamie will be there.
Not going to be able to make it this year, but
yeah. Yep. And then let's bring in our next guest here, Steve.
Hey,
from Fantasy Six Pack. You guys all know him, Mr. IDP Hunter. What's going on, man?
Yeah, I'm just happy because, maybe this is a cry for help, but Joe Bond doesn't let me out of the IDP cellar much. He has the key locked. So I'm just excited to be around you great guys, you great gladiators of men to talk about some good old-fashioned offensive football.
There we go.
Awesome.
I mean,
Well,
you
we're glad
begged
to have
enough.
you.
Jeez.
I did. I heard Chris was coming on. I got to hear what he has to say. It's a free ticket.
No, this is good stuff. So, and you got your fans. All right, so let's jump into the first question here, and it's going to be about the Atlanta Falcons, and I'll help you out here, Mike, I think, if I can figure this out. Yeah, there we go.
The old switcheroo.
Yeah, we can switch it up because the comments will cover Steve's face. We realized, so we had to do the little swap there.
You mean like the F6P logos covering yours?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Mike, God, what are you doing here, man? All right. I'm not paying attention either. All right, so first question here for the Atlanta Falcons. Chris, this one's going to go to you first. So we're talking about some Drake London here. So you think he's primed for a breakout, finally, like officially breaking out now that he's got a competent quarterback in Kirk Cousins? Current ADP right now is wide receiver 11, around 19th overall. You think he could bring back that value or maybe even then some?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I think the two things we have to consider, it's not just the talent of the player themselves. I know that when Drake London was coming out of college, a few years back, he was getting the Cooper Kupp light comps, being able to be not just had the big slot archetype of like from a body type perspective, but then also the routes he was running while he was still at USC. Yeah, if I'm remembering right. Either way, like he had that, like, can he win in contested catch situations? Like, yeah, for the most part, but can he also be that type of route runner that can eat up zone coverage? And that was definitely like part of his game while he was still in college. It's like from a talent perspective, that's been on display since day one of him being in the NFL. The questions that we do have, or we should have, is if the schematics are there from an offensive standpoint, and also the quarterback is capable of actually putting him in a situation where he can actually be that wide receiver one that we expect him to be. And so I'll start with like the offensive portion of it. Going from the Arthur Smith, we're going to be more of a run heavy type of offense from a pass rate over expectation. The Falcons were like bottom three in terms of pass rate over expectation, like while Arthur Smith was the head coach. So from a volume standpoint, like there was just never enough targets to go around in order for him to really be the guy that you would want him to be. But now with Zach Robinson coming over from the Rams, I mean, they're like the Rams, like plays per game were up towards the top of the league at 63, 64 plays per game. Also, their early down passing rate was top 5, top 6. Mm-hmm. I mean, their pace was, everything was there. Everything was there for the Rams. I'm going to say that from a volume standpoint, you're going from one of the slower, sloggier teams to now one of the faster paced teams. And now that's not to say that the Falcons going to turn into like the Chiefs of old or anything like that, but at the very least you're now moving into a situation or in like a passing environment where Drake London can have that volume that you would expect of a wide receiver one, or at least a wide receiver one commensurate with his ADP. But now also, does the quarterback actually fit? Well, Kirk Cousins, he comes from that same type of Shanahan tree that would kind of lend itself to him being in this offense. Everybody's seen that graphic, right? Of like, what is the 2012, 2013, like Washington football, like the coaching staff, where it was like LaFleur, Shanahan, and like, all those guys, Mike McDaniel. All
Dagger,
those, right? Yeah, it's like, it's ridiculous. But like,
I'm a Commanders fan.
I know you've seen it. I know I'm talking about the people that are listening right now. But like all of those guys have now become one of like the premier play callers in the league, and they all like to use like heavy play action. Last season, they were like top 12 in terms of play action. The Rams were, and that was with Matthew Stafford. But we've also seen the same thing for Kirk Cousins when he was up with O'Connell, like up in Minnesota, and that's been the case for Mike McDaniel, like with Tua, like down in Miami. So like in play action, for those who don't know, for wide receivers, that actually increases. That's like almost a force multiplier in terms of what type of value it brings to a wide receiver from a fantasy standpoint. So if we're getting more if we're not just getting more volume, but more efficient volume, more play action, like more intermediate shots for Drake London to create after the catch, and just more volume in general, I mean, all of it kind of like intersects at this point where Drake London is going to get the volume. He's going to get the efficient targets. And also the offense will be able to move at a pace where they're going to be in scoring position more often so that we can at least get a few more touchdowns for Drake London. So all of that to say, yes, we already know Drake London has the talent, but now can the offense and the quarterback also come along in order for him to be that wide receiver one we've all wanted to be since he came out? I do think that all of that kind of lines up for him to be that for 2024.
I like it. Steve, you got anything to add to that?
I'm going to go the opposite way. I think it's a little too high. I think we're jumping to conclusions a little bit. I don't remember that movie Office Space, the jump to conclusion, Matt. I think we're on it. Jump in. The thing about London is he actually has had the targets. He's had 29% target, 3% target share in his career. Yet he hasn't finished wide receiver 2 yet. I just think we're crowning him a little bit too early. You're saying wide receiver 12, fringe. I can see a fringe tier 1 back end wide receiver 2 maybe, but just in short, I could think of 12 other wide receivers I'd rather have in a draft than London. I'd be happier with him as an early wide receiver 2 though.
All right, AJ.
Yeah, London's kind of an interesting one for me. I haven't really been overly impressed with him, but I haven't also had a lot of shares of him. So, I've always kind of steered away just because of, the Arthur Smith, fallacy that he is of an actual coach and or offensive mind. To be determined in Pittsburgh, I guess. But yeah, I do like London this year. I think, the clean slate is something that I like for him. I'm interested to see what he can do with Cousins. Cousins has had plenty of success throughout his career and, had some big name receivers working with him as well. And he's made them who they are. So I think he can do the same with London. I think this is going to be an exciting year for London. But at the same time, I do think he's being a little overvalued just for that upside. But we'll see what happens, I guess. If he's there, and I'm ready to take the chance, I might do it. So
I, for one, am a fan. I do think the efficiency of the catchable passes his way was not good with the quarterback situation. So I think that's only going to go up. Plus, you had the volume that Chris was talking about. That's obviously that we all think is going to go up. I just think he's going to be one of the really good. Now you're paying for it. Like people are buying into it, and you're paying for it. But I think it's reasonable to pay for it. Honestly, I really do. So, yeah.
All right,
AJ, next question.
Let's move into the running backs here and talk about Mr. Bijan Robinson. Do we think that Bijan can actually dethrone CMC as the RB1 this season? Now that Arthur Smith's not there. Steve, we'll start with you.
Oh,
Steve?
I think Steve is frozen.
Yeah, it's frozen. Sorry. I'm going to say no, but it's a lot closer. I'm excited for him. Just think of like an old Corvette. Let's rev, let him run. It's being rumored all through camp they're going to give him the attempts just like CMC. But again, we're talking about CMC here. What's the old expression? One in the hand is better than two in the pitches. Let me go with give me the guy that I already know that's consistent and has done it over and over again versus the mystery. There's no secret why CMC is the 1.1 in the majority of drafts. So I'm going to say no, but it's a lot closer.
Okay. Chris, what do you think about Bijan this year?
I guess it depends. And I say it depends based off of where you're drafting at, because am I taking him over CMC? Absolutely not. Am I going to take him over Breece Hall? I think that's a bit more of a conversation. And I think that's more about the contingent value of the running backs that are behind both of those guys. Because with Bijan, I mean, Tyler Algier showed us in his rookie season that he's actually a legitimate running back. Like, that's not to say that Zach Robinson is going to come in and say that, all right, well, he's so good, you need to be the backup. We need to enforce some sort of 60-40 split committee, like something like that. That's not what I'm saying. But I will say, though, that the talent behind Bijan versus the talent behind Breece Hall, that's like that. There's a chasm in between those two. I mean, Braylon Allen and was it Izzy Abanikanda? It's like sitting behind like Breece Hall. So it's like I can take Breece Hall knowing that I don't have to worry about those guys. I really don't. I mean, Braylon Allen has been flashing in camp. He could be a guy that if they wanted to rotate him in short yardage situations, I could see that happening. But I don't see Braylon Allen taking over, let's say, 5 to 10% of the carries on a week-to-week basis. I don't see him like mixing in on like third downs or in 2-minute situations. I could see that happening with Tyler Algier. Like he has been talked up as a guy that they've been impressed with like throughout camp. And again, like I was mentioning beforehand, in his rookie season, he did show that he was capable of being like a 1,000-yard type rusher if given the type of workload. So while Bijan, like last season, he was like top 5, top 6 in like forced missed tackle rate, adjusted yards after contact per attempt, like some of those advanced rushing metrics that would highlight his, ability to like be that guy that can like wiggle through like, tight spaces and all of that, and also be a legitimate receiver out of the backfield. I mean, he has all the tools to be that. But in my mind, drafting him over like either Breece Hall or Christian McCaffrey just means that you're sacrificing some opportunity costs, like because we know those guys are getting the rock. We know that CMC, assuming health because of the calf strain that he's currently going through and all of other stuff, all things being equal, if everybody's healthy, CMC is getting the most of the workload out of any of those guys. But looking at the talent behind them, I mean, CMC is in a similar situation. We're not expecting Elijah Mitchell or Jordan Mason or Isaac Guerrero or Cody Schratt. Like, we're not expecting any of those guys to come in and take 2, 3, 4 carries and a couple of targets away from Christian McCaffrey on a week-to-week basis. We're not expecting, like I said earlier, Izzy Abanikanda and like Braylon Allen, all those guys to take carries and targets away from Breece Hall. Could I see Tyler Algier mixing in for a few carries here and there? I actually can see that. And so that's where if I'm at like the 106, 107, okay, Bijan, fine. If I'm at the 104, 105, I think that's harder for me to pull the trigger on him. So I'm in on Bijan, but it's more of a function of where I'm drafting at than anything else.
Yeah. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like Bijan. I do hesitate. One day I like Breece more, one day I like Bijan more. It just keeps flip-flopping. Like, I really like the fact that, Bijan, down the stretch, once they kind of like, it felt like there was a point in the season where like they kind of flipped it and they were like, okay, Bijan, go. Let's see what you could do. And they kind of figured it out. Now I know it's a whole totally new coaching staff, but you got to feel like that was sort of just the beginning a little bit with him. I mean, he saw 86 targets his rookie year. I feel like that's, I mean, who knows? Maybe he doesn't even get that again, but maybe that's kind of like the Saquon like deal where like he just saw a boatload of targets his rookie year because the team was trash, and then they just tried to figure something else out with him. But he just so elusive and everything else. And I know Algier's there, but I really do think that if they do give him the amount of workload, like he could potentially challenge CMC. I wouldn't be shocked. But he has to get the workload. And you're right, Chris. Like, I'm not taking him over any one of those guys. But at the end of the season, I would not be shocked if they got a similar workload that Bijan outperformed CMC. Yeah. So.
All right. Yeah. All good thoughts. I like Bijan as well, but I have a hard time taking him above some of those other guys as well. So
it's a better question, like Chris said. It's better if you ask it like Breece Hall. Like I would probably debate that, but CMC, that's hard to.
Yeah, that's tougher. Yeah. Because you're not taking Bijan at the 101 or 102.
Yeah, right. I don't think it was. Are you going to draft him over?
Yeah,
but just more just like is the potential there to dethrone him at some point? And. Yeah. I think it is potentially. A lot of things got to go his way, but yeah, that's what it is. And CMC's already dealing with an injury, so who knows?
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, so over here to the next one. So Kyle Pitts, right, is the other player that new coaching staff, new quarterback, everybody is buying back into, right? So after last season, it was like, I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore with Kyle Pitts. Well, yeah, I think you're pulling me back in, right? That's happening to a lot of people. I sort of been falling into that. Should we be, right? Tight end 6 off the board. He was tight end like 13 last season. It was not good for him. Chris, what are you thinking with Kyle Pitts with all this new hype again for him?
What's the phrase that Sigmund Bloom likes to use, the assumption of rational coaching? And I'm just going to have to make that assumption for Kyle Pitts in 2024. Because if you just look at, like, if you were thinking about how you would use use a tight end, even one as freakishly athletic as Kyle Pitts, I would not envision, at least me personally, and again, I'm just a nerd that like writes about fantasy football, so like don't like take my word for what it is, but I would not think that I would take my tight end and place him out on the perimeter to go up against like a team's like number one cornerback,
right,
or even like their second cornerback. In terms of where he was deployed relative to other tight ends, Kyle Pitts saw at least like the second or third like highest snap rate like out on the perimeter. That doesn't say he was always targeted out there, but he was running a lot of his routes from outside. Now I get it, he's big, he's freakish, and I get that, but I've got wide receivers to do that. I don't want to put my tight end I don't want to put my tight end like out there on a DB. That just, to me, that doesn't make any sense. So that's part one. Part two, his average depth of target, I would get, like, if you guys know it off the top of your heads, like you can go ahead and say it, but just like average guess, like what do you guys think his average depth of target was in 2023?
I do not know it.
6 yards.
No, double that. It was 12.
Yeah.
So like, again, if I'm thinking about it rationally, like why would I put my tight end, my star freakish tight end out on the perimeter, part one, and then part two, ask him to win like downfield at 12 yards a clip? That doesn't make any sense.
That's like wide receiver level.
Yeah, that's wide receiver level.
Yeah.
Like I don't want my tight
honestly,
end.
I'm looking it up now. It's 0.1 yards less than Drake London.
See, so it's like the offense doesn't make any sense, like in terms of like how you're going to deploy your personnel. So now if we are going to assume rational coaching from Zach Robinson, we're going to assume now with this personnel, we've got Drake London here. They bring in Darnell Mooney, who could potentially do what Kyle Pitts was doing last year, to be that sacrificial X receiver that's just out there running wind sprints like all day long. And now you're actually going to pull Kyle Pitts now into the slot. Out of all the tight ends actually that were targeted more than 15% of the time, but had like a minimum 15% target share last year, and that was like Darren Waller, Dallas Goedert, and all those guys. Like Kyle Pitts had the lowest slot like target rate like from the slot. It was like him and like Chig Okonkwo, like that was like the battling for the most like slot targets. So now if we move away from the volatile targets and now start giving him layup targets so that he can actually use that freakish athleticism that we know that he has in order to start like creating after the catch, then I can see it. But all stems from this idea that Zach Robinson knows how to deploy like a functional offense, which again, we're making that assumption, but at least in my mind, I think he's at least capable of doing that after watching what he did with the Rams. I mean, of course, he had Sean McVay there, so I'm not giving him all the credit, but at least seeing the offenses that he's been a part of, I can buy into the hype for a guy like Kyle Pitts in 2024.
Oh, makes sense. Steve, anything to add there?
Yeah, well said. If I may, let's go back to Pitts' rookie year. I mean, he was second most in receiving yard history for tight ends. That feels like years ago, you know? It really does, but the guy's not dead. He's just had terrible play around him. He has a better O-line this year. He has a better quarterback, better play caller, you know, as you just alluded to. So, you know, we just got to let all that play out. 6 or 7 tight end off the board, that's very generous. I'm excited. I'm all back in. And I don't think we have seen Kyle Pitts' apex yet. I think there's more yet to come, especially, you know, I think Cousins will unlock that a little bit better. But, yeah, there's nothing wrong with Kyle Pitts. He's just he's a question mark because of the people that have been around him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm nervous about it, but I think I'm willing to pull the trigger on him this year again. So
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to get a few Pittses on my team. Teams here and there.
I'm buying in, but I don't have any shares of them. So
I don't
feel like
either.
Yeah.
I keep seeing what happens is I keep seeing like Andrews or somebody else like fall around who shouldn't.
Right.
So I snag them before it gets to the Pitts range. So I have a bunch of drafts still coming up. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. But Pitts is definitely one of the guys who I can circle and be like, I can feel good about it, but then also be severely worried at the same time.
Yeah, I think like Pitts falls into the very end of that like first tier of tight ends that you would consider to be like the elite options, right? Like from starting from Kelsey, Laporta, Andrews, Trey McBride. I mean, most of those guys, and then I think like Pitts, and then like it's
Kittle
like him and Kittle. Like it's like that's the end.
That's kind of it. Yeah. You're right.
And
totally right.
To your point, Chris, what always been conditioned to do? Get the elite tight ends or wait till the end of drafts? We just have to untrain ourselves, accept what Kyle Pitts is, dive in.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's jump over here to the Carolina Panthers.
All right. We'll do. We'll start off with Mr. Bryce Young here, the quarterback in his second year. I mean, from a fantasy perspective, are we ready to jump all in with Bryce Young now that he's got a new head coach and Dave Canales, and he's got a lot more weapons around him this year? Or are we worried about a potential sophomore slump, especially with the change in coordinator and coach and everything? Steve, we'll start with you. What do you think?
Sophomore slump? Oh my God, it has to get better than last year. All that stuff that was going on wasn't Young's fault. The offensive line could not block my grandmother if she was pass rushing. You had a 56-year-old Adam Thielen out there trying to run routes. It wasn't good. Everything is just so much better. I know we're worried about quarterbacks that second year a little bit. It has no choice but to go up. Little fun fact, the new coach, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, was Dave Quinellis. If you look back, he was the one that unlocked Geno Smith when he had that comeback player of the year season. So if anybody can do this, he's a literal horse whisperer for quarterbacks. I think it's him.
All right, Chris, what do you like about Young this year?
Yeah, I think Steve hit the nail on the head. Like, you've got the coaching staff. I mean, starting off, it was like a horrific situation for Bryce Young. And we've seen like first round quarterbacks go into similar situations. I mean, say what you want about Zach Wilson, but getting drafted to the Jets and having to go through what he did, probably not the best environment for a quarterback to develop in. And now we're seeing something similar with Bryce Young. I mean, Frank Reich coming in there, we thought was going to be something of a stable situation, and then everything completely craters for him afterwards. So it's like seeing Dave Canales come in, to Steve's point, he does the Geno Smith revival like a couple years ago. Last year in Tampa with Baker Mayfield, we see him revive like his career with him throwing bombs to Mike Evans like week in and week out. There's something to the fact that Canales knows how to hone in on what quarterbacks do well. And I think for both of them, I think the funny thing, though, is for Bryce specifically, is that he's not the same archetype of like quarterback as like Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith. Not to say that Bryce Young isn't aggressive or can't be aggressive, but Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, they do like to be like those aggressive downfield, outside the numbers type of throwers, and that really fit for the personnel that they had like at the time. I mean, Geno Smith had DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Baker Mayfield had Mike Evans, and then Chris Godwin can work the intermediate parts of the field. Now, Bryce Young, again, not to say that he can't hit stuff like down the like outside the hashes, but look at the guys that they brought in like over the offseason. They make the offensive line investments, but they bring in Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, like they make those investments to make sure that they're shored up in front of Bryce Young. And look at the types of wide receiver that they bring in. Now, did they go up and get like your DJ Charks, like the sprinters, the guys that are going to move like down the line? No, they've already tried that beforehand. They wind up getting a guy like Diontae Johnson, the guy that can actually work the intermediate parts of the field, be that guy that can work on crossing patterns, and just be that high-end targeter that can create after the catch. Now, I know that there are some concerns about DJ's like his effort on the field. I remember there were some people from Pittsburgh that probably remember seeing a few games of him kind of dogging out there on the field. But from a target earning perspective, I mean, with him, Adam Thielen, we already know where he operates. Jonathan Mingo in the intermediate parts of the field. I mean, and also Xavier Legette. I mean, those are all guys that can actually play that intermediate to deep parts of the field where it's like, if Bryce Young has to really like hone in on just being like, that's guy, we're going to hammer intermediate crossers. That's all we're going to do and let guys work after the catch. They have the personnel to really do that. So I think it's not just the fact they bring in Canales, who is that QB coach, like type of QB whisperer type of coach, but also like you can see the inner workings of this is the personnel we're going to surround around Bryce Young that can really, again, hone in on what he does well and then create the passing concepts to really accentuate that. So I really like everything about what they've done so far during the offseason.
Yeah, Bryce has been a big target of mine actually this year, as a second quarterback or in dynasty for sure. I just really I liked him coming into last year, honestly, but last year was definitely more of a poop show, and
to say
rightfully so, because Carolina just in general was. So I'm excited to see what Canales can bring and how it's going to fit with Young this year and how he's going to implement all these new weapons. And, I really hope that he flourishes. I believe in the sophomore slump. I've seen it, but I'm hoping that he's not one that faces that. So,
yeah, I mean, if he has a sophomore slump, he's going to get benched.
Yeah.
If I may, Joe, to add what AJ said and Chris said, I tweeted this. I went looking through when Chris was talking to you guys at both points. The Panthers had the worst receiver core last year per PFF for any route over 10 yards. They were the worst. Now you got this guy. Now you got some players around him. Who they draft? They drafted Leggett, right? Xavier Leggett profiled in college. Guess what he profiled as? The highest rated receiver running routes over 10 yards over Neighbors, Harrison. So it connects. The dots are connected. Yeah. Well said again.
There you go. Jamie, and your face gets covered anyway because Jamie typed too much. Talking about how they drafted. So there you go.
Yeah. All lines up.
I like it. All right. What do we got for running backs, Joe?
Yeah. So, Jonathan Brooks and Chubba Hubbard and, forgotten man Miles Sanders, I guess, is still there. But, Jonathan Brooks is still recovering from the ACL injury. This is opening the door for Hubbard to kind of be the start of week one and for at least the early part of the season here. Do you think, Chris, Hubbard will keep the starting job, play well enough to keep it? Or once Brooks is back, give him a couple of weeks to kind of figure things out and, kind of get used to the NFL game, he's just going to take over?
All right. Well, this requires like a lot of like walking down narrative street again, to use like a Sigmund Bloom adage, because is anybody of the mind that the Panthers going to be competing for the NFC South this season? I am not, but I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna hate rain on anybody's parade. But if you believe that the Panthers are going to be competing for the division title, I mean, I'll just stop right there. No takers. Okay. Well, if we're not thinking that the Panthers are going to be competing for the division, they traded up to get Jonathan Brooks, if memory serves. They do understand like what he's going to be for this franchise in 2025 and beyond, not 2024. And he's coming off of a fairly serious, knee injury / surgery. Mm-hmm. What is the rush to load him up with carries in 2024? I'm just tossing that out there. Not saying that's what it's going to be. I'm just constructing a narrative to say that Chubba Hubbard from week 6 on throughout the 2023 regular season actually played fairly well. If memory serves, go check out his advanced metrics. He averaged more yards after contact per attempt than Breece Hall. And so he was up there like from a volume perspective. I mean, if he can still play efficiently and still keep like their running game like on track, I mean, do they have to showcase Jonathan Brooks to the point where he completely takes over Chuba Hubbard goes back to the bench and we never hear from either him or Miles Sanders. I don't know. I struggle with that. And just thinking about it again from a rational standpoint, it's like, why potentially subject him to more injury? Like, I understand like getting his sea legs under and make sure he's adjusting to NFL speed, like so on and so forth. I understand him mixing in, but I can just see Hubbard continuing to have at least something of a role throughout the 2023 regular season because they know what Brooks will be for that franchise, but doesn't necessarily have to be in 2024, more for the future.
Yeah. Steve.
Man, I'm so glad Chris went first because that's exactly what I was thinking. As crazy as that sounds, I do actually think that it's probably going to be a 50-50 split with Hubbard and Brooks. And as crazy as that sounds, you could actually make a case. There's a path to take Hubbard ahead of Brooks, at least in redrafts anyway. You know what I mean? You want to nurse the guy you have high draft cap, the guy that you think's your future. Why would you just bring him in there to get killed? So I exactly, we're on the same page on that one.
Yeah. AJ, you can give your thoughts and then give my quick little take on it.
Yeah. I mean, not too much to add. I do like Hubbard for this season more than I like Brooks, which seems to be the consensus here. I definitely am all for stashing Brooks and going after him in Dynasty and, not really worrying about him being a big factor this year. I think you just have to know that going into it, and we've seen Hubbard come in and basically steal the backfield, multiple occasions, multiple years now. It seems like Sanders coming off a really good year with Philly was worthless last year from a fantasy standpoint. And it hurts to say that in a sense, but I'm glad that the Eagles didn't pay him because, that's why he was, trying as hard as he did, I guess, to get that contract. And, that was really his best year in Philly. So I think Hubbard is definitely a solid, starting option. We know he's going to start these first 3-4 games, going into this year. And I think that he's going to just kind of take it from there and they're going to see what they have with him. And, hopefully the offense just clicks all around and I think both of them can produce this year, but I agree with the point that it's probably more of a 50-50 later on. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add really, except that, I took Hubbard in the 15th round of a Scott Fish because I believe that he's at least the guy for the first few weeks and probably not going really anywhere. And to get him in the 15th round, like that was a steal. I felt like so.
He'll get run.
I was all for it. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So last guy we got here is Mr. Diontae Johnson, and that is his current ADP right now, sitting at about wide receiver 41, so around 90th overall, and this should be half PPR. But with this change of scenery that he's got now, and obviously the new quarterback with Bryce, who we already talked about, do we think Diontae is fairly priced, or do we think he's being undervalued in drafts this year, Steve?
So this is a fun one because I think Diontae Johnson is a steal this year. He's the clear-cut wide receiver one on this team, right? He runs way better routes than anything they've ever had before, right? It's not unrealistic to say that he's going to have 120, 130 targets in this offense. And just to bring this home a little bit, just make this more transparent, Adam Thielen last year was a wide receiver 17, and he was given 137 targets. That was last season. And like I said, his route running was horrible. So he was moving like the ghost of Christmas past last season. So, again, bringing in a better receiver, the sky's the limit. Just want to throw a fun fact. Shout out to Kyle Sendra. I was on his show the other day. He does the Fantasy Football League Winners. He actually went a little bolder, and he said he's his wide receiver 25 on the season. I'm not going to say that, but I think wide receiver 41 is a steal, and I would smash that if I seen that in drafts.
All right. Chris, what do you see for Diontae this year?
Well, I think the easiest way to look at it is, and I'll just use like underdogs, like ADP is kind of a proxy, but look at the guys that are currently going around him. You got like Christian Watson, Roma Dunze, Lad McConkey, JSN, Brian Thomas, Keon Coleman, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, those are the types of wide receivers that are getting drafted around him. And like of all of those guys, I think only like 2 of them have either like had like a 24% ish target share or more, like in the past like couple of seasons. The rest of these guys were all projecting, right? Xavier Worthy, we're projecting he's going to be this awesome like new target, like new play thing for Patrick Mahomes. Roma Dunze with Caleb Williams, JSN in this new offense, like new offense system with Ryan Grubb. I mean, only DeAndre Hopkins, who's at about a 29% target share last year, who's now got his knee is jacked up. Then Chris Godwin last year with Baker Mayfield, who's around like 24%. All the rest of these guys were projecting. We're hoping Jameson Williams turns into this thing with like with Jared Goff and the Lions. Like we're hoping that Christian Watson can get his hamstrings correct and he actually turns into the guy for the Packers. So like all these other guys, like we're projecting. I know Diontae Johnson is going to walk into 150 targets. We've seen him do it like multiple seasons. He averaged like over 150 for like the 2 healthy seasons when he was in Pittsburgh before last year. He was like 160 plus and 140 plus in 21 and 22. Like he's averaging like more targets like than all of these guys together. So it's like if you just want to put up like a list of names and say like which guy sticks out from a volume earning perspective, I mean it's Diontae Johnson. Like he's head and shoulders above all those guys from, and you can say like, oh well, I mean the Steelers didn't have anybody except for like a rookie George Pickens and all that other stuff, and like there's not a lot of target competition around him. It's like okay, fine. But if he's still earning targets, like compared, like relative to the other, like high end wide receivers, like in 2022, he was 13th in air yards and like top 10 in target share. It's like, so that's compared to like everybody else in the league.
Yeah.
So if he's still a high end target earner, like relative to all the rest of the wide receivers in the league, and he's also going to be on a squad to Steve's point, that's like Adam Thielen and like the rookie Leggett and like all those other guys. It's like, I guess I'll just take that guy that I know is going to earn volume versus trying to make bets on, like I said, a couple of rookies, a dude whose hamstring has been busted for the past like year or so. I mean, I'd rather just take that easy bet versus like walking into some uncertainty.
I couldn't agree more. Totally do. I mean, we also probably think the Panthers are going to be losing a lot of games, right? So you get some of that garbage time, just truck it down the field, see what happens. Kind of plays,
Yeah.
So there you go. That doesn't hurt either. So, all right. So that's going to be it for the Panthers. Next up, we will be jumping into the good old Tampa Bay Bucks, and we will start with some Baker Mayfield. Had himself quite the career year last year. Everybody was down and out on Baker, and obviously, we thought for good reason, but he proved the doubters wrong. Got himself over 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns. Do you see him finishing inside the top 12 QBs? He was QB 10 last year, Chris. What do you think?
That's tough for me. That's tough. I mean, it's mostly just because you're projecting the same amount of offensive efficiency as he did last year. And for a guy like, it'd be one thing if you're telling me, and I'm not even going to try and compare him to Patrick Mahomes, but let's just say to the other top 12-ish quarterbacks from like, that aren't like in the top 6, but let's talk about, we can say like Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, like the guys that are being drafted more on the back end. At least from a year in, year out standpoint, again, assuming health and all that, we do know that the efficiency is more or less stable with those guys. Whereas with Baker, it needed to be like these, we would mostly consider to be like volatile type passes where he was throwing those bombs to Mike Evans. Like we would assume those to be like something that might regress, over a year's time. So it's like I'm excited about them trying to incorporate like at least a more stable third wide receiver in that group. Been hearing a lot about Jalen McMillan. We'll see if Trey Palmer becomes a thing, because I know the team still wants to see if they can get him and integrated into their passing game as well. But it's just like from a personnel standpoint, I mean, it's not like Mike Evans is getting any younger. Same thing with Chris Godwin. He's going to be what, 28, 29 this season as well. So you've got like an aging core wide receiver group, tied to like their offensive line is still like fairly solid. And now we're asking a quarterback that we've only seen do this essentially once to do this again and have this high efficiency type passing attack. Oh, by the way, with an OC that hasn't done it before. I mean, he was like the Rams offensive coordinator back in like 2022, but we know who's really driving the car there. I mean, so it's like, I have questions about whether or not this can be something that Baker can recreate. Can he be top 16-ish, like top 20, like to what Jamie's saying in the chat? I can absolutely see that. Can he be a guy that if you needed him to be like your starter, be your starter like during bye weeks or something like that? Absolutely. But am I drafting him with the bet that he's going to be top 12 again? Absolutely not. Like that's too tough of a bet for me to make in 2024.
Steve?
If I can add the schedule, let's take a look at this, okay? Tampa Bay's got a brutal 6-week stretch. They're going to be on the road division games against Atlanta and New Orleans. You know then the Buccaneers go home. They play the Baltimore Ravens before hosting Atlanta in a rematch from the 3 weeks before. Then you have the Buccaneers Monday Night Football playing at Arrowhead Stadium. Hello, Kansas City Chiefs. Before going back to Florida on a short week to host the 49ers. Getting both Super Bowl teams in a span of 6 days, that's brutal as heck. So you can't help but think this year there's going to be a little bit of regression with Baker. There has to be. And what he did last year was a great feel-good story, but the schedule's harder, and it's gonna be tough sledding, and everybody's getting a little bit older. So yeah, I don't think he's gonna repeat, and I think you got to expect just a little bit of a downward trend.
Yeah. I'm kind of out on Baker this year. I think last year was a bit of an anomaly. You know, it was a great year for him. Not to take anything away from what he did. It helps when you have Mike Evans, who just refuses to not get 1,000-yard season ever. So that's always good there. You know, Cade Otton was there here and there for some games. Godwin was mostly healthy. So I think the fact that their offense was pretty balanced with Rachaad White helped him, you know, just be a better quarterback. I think he came into the season not necessarily thinking he needed to do, you know, everything, and he just kind of played his game, and it worked out. But yeah, that schedule that Steve pointed out, that's, you know, one of my fortes too, is always looking at schedules and trying to figure out, you know, strength of schedule and who's got better matchups when, especially for a guy like Baker, where he'd be like a bye week fill-in for me more than somebody I'm going to be just waiting around and hope he falls to me. I don't see him as that. So hopefully he's not playing one of those teams in that nasty stretch for when my starting quarterback has their bye. Otherwise, I'm not going to be, you know, counting on Baker much either. So,
yeah, the only thing I'll add, and then AJ, you can move on, is
right.
One of the reasons why he finished QB10 last year was he had a great season, don't get me wrong, but one of the other big reasons was we had a ton of quarterback injuries last year, and then add in the fact that like Mahomes had a pretty horrible year for Mahomes, right? Like he finished outside the top 12 QB, like in some scoring formats, right? It wasn't great. You know, you expect guys like Richardson, Burrow to be back and healthy. Kyler gets a full season. And then you get these other like running quarterbacks, like the rookies, like Jaden Daniels, who could potentially, you know, outperform him just with his legs alone. So like all of those factors. And then like, I'm still a believer in Trevor Lawrence, you know, kind of bumping back up. So there's just a lot of guys who I think can just jump over him. Even if he were to have a similar season, I think they could still outperform him just to kind of regress back to the mean for them. So that would be the only thing I would add.
All right. So jumping in to receiver here, we just talked about Mr. Godwin. Basically, the reports out of training camp are saying that Godwin's going to be going back to the slot role this year. And that's where he finished as a wide receiver too, back in 2019. So with this move, do we think Godwin's being underrated going into the draft right now? Just for sake, his current ADP is about wide receiver 34 or 75th overall. Steve, what are you feeling for Godwin this year?
You ever see that movie, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde? That's Godwin. Okay.
Yeah.
2022, good season. 2023, bad season. 2022, Godwin had 297 snaps out wide, 576 in the slot. 2023, 588 wide, 295 in the slot. Not as good, right? Sign me up for this slot action with Godwin. And if I can add the narrative on Godwin, people are incorrectly saying that he's old. He's not old. He's 28. He's still good. That's good. We still got good years out of him, all right? People are saying that he's washed. He's not washed. He just regressed a little bit because of injuries. So let's just assume he has a healthy year and he's in that slot where his ADP stands. That's an excellent buy right now.
Yeah. Good points. Chris, what do you think?
No, I think I wholeheartedly agree with Steve. I mean, it's you should be putting your wide receivers in the best chances to win. And if he winds up flipping back to that, because I think he was at like a 70-ish% snap rate from the slot in like 2021, 2022, and then takes like a massive drop off in 2023. Let's shift that back. Let's get him back in the position that he knows best, that he can operate best from. But I think it goes back to my earlier point about this wide receiver core in that they just need more bodies. They need guys that are more reliable so that when they do run out in 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets, they do have a third wide receiver out there that's capable of actually either winning on the outside or operating from the interior or whatever, so that they don't have to worry about who that third body is going to be that's out there. Because like last year, the rotating, insert name of guy like Buccaneers wide receiver that we've been interested in over the years. Because what was it? Russell Gage at one point with Jalen Darden.
Oh, jeez.
Think of those
Scotty
guys.
Miller.
Scotty Miller. like we've been interested in that third wide receiver for the Bucs, especially when it was Tom Brady that was there, because we knew those two were going to get theirs. But if we just knew who that third wide receiver is going to be for that, for the Bucs, it's like, holy shit, we've probably got some good value there. And none of them have panned out. So now at least the training camp reports are showing us that, all right, maybe Trey Palmer is good. And then, like I mentioned beforehand, Jalen McMillan that comes over from that story, Huskies, offense that we are all super high on after last year. It's like, okay, if either of those two hits, now we're really cooking with gas, because not only does that give that a lane for Baker Mayfield to continue to be efficient, we definitely want that to be a thing, so that carries the values of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But now we also got a third target, because now if I don't get Mike Evans in the second or third round, and I miss out on Chris Godwin in the 6th or 7th round, I still have access to that passing game that's going to come later on, because I'm not drafting Kate Otten. I ain't doing any of that.
No.
But if I can get one of those other guys, then okay. But yeah, I'm 100% with you that Chris Godwin, for where he's being drafted right now, I think he's appropriately priced. But at the same time, could I see him winding up at the end of the season where he's more like a 4th round value than a 6th round value? I can absolutely see that.
Yeah,
100% agree. In fact, we are doing a series of videos where we're interviewing beat reporters or just reporters for the team in general. And JC Allen from the Pewter Report came on. It was talking about just how fantastic Godwin has looked playing back in his slot role. And just guys, he's a fantasy player, so he was all about it. He was like, guys, buy the dip. He needs to be drafted higher. Pay the go get him before everybody else in the league, because you will not regret it. And I know he's a beat reporter, so take it with a grain of salt. But it makes me a little excited to maybe we get Godwin old. I would say I've got all the stats on the screen here from his past 5 seasons. The only thing is the touchdowns every year just keep dropping, and you're that's if those don't go back up. He has to have a monster reception season in order for him to counter that. It's when can the touchdowns come back? That's the thing that you got to ask.
Yeah. But look at it last year also, one of the stats from last year was that his ADOT crept up. It was almost it nearly doubled. think it was like 6-7 yards and like in 21 and 22 and is like up past 10 last year. So now if we're also getting the slot, but then also potentially shorter targets, that might at least paper over some of the touchdown concerns. Because if you're getting more receptions, we're getting some more yards, touchdowns might not be as big of a need for him like this season.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see him get back to at least this, the 2021, at least the 5, floor for touchdowns.
Yeah.
More than that would be great. And that's, again, assuming, like you said, Chris, the targets are there, the receptions are creeping up more. That A-dot's creeping up. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for with Godwin. I love Godwin this year. I'm trying to get as much of him as I can. I'm just buying in big on the bounce back. So
some of the guys he's going around in ADP right now, like I'm looking at the consensus ADP across like the 9 sites that we've got here on Fantasy Six Pack. I mean, I like Terry McLaurin. That's probably a pretty good with him. But like Calvin Ridley's there, Jaden Reed is there, Keenan Allen is right above him. I'll be honest with you, man. I'll take Godwin over those guys. I feel like he's a little safer.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So, all right. Next Buccaneer here we've got is the running back Rachaad White. And look, we know Rachaad White last year was, really good for fantasy. His efficiency though was not very good though. And so with them drafting Bucky Irving this year, how do you have any concern taking Rachaad White at his current ADP? I believe it's like middle second roundish for him. And, with the fear that Irving's going to take some of this workload, and the stats I've got on the screen here are the touch percentage. This is touch percentage. So this is receptions and carries. He led the league for running backs last year. That's over Christian McCaffrey. Derrick Henry was second at 41.2. He had 41.8. It's pretty staggering numbers, right? But his efficiency, he's the only one on this board with a less than yards per carry, less than 4. So if he doesn't get that volume, what are we thinking? Or are you not worried about Irving taking this volume, Chris?
Man, that's the part that I struggle with Rachaad White. It's like you can give somebody all the volume in the world, but I have a hard time seeing it repeat if the peripherals like aren't as strong. And to your point, I mean, there are about 15, 16 running backs last season that had over a 50% share of their other team's rush attempts. Rachaad White was like either the 14th or 15th in almost like every single advanced metric. Yeah. Right? It was tough. It was tough to watch. And it's almost like the Bucs knew that, but it's not like they had anybody better on the roster that could take the job away from him. It's just like, you're the dude because we like ... because we have nobody else. That's right. At least that's what it felt like to me. But now if you're going to tell me this season that, I mean, Bucky Irving at he's like 5'9", 5'10", $190. So really it's not like we can expect like Irving to come in and challenge him for like the early down workload. We can't expect that. Can we see him mixing in on third downs, obvious passing situations? Okay. 2-minute drill. Okay. From a red zone passer over expectation standpoint, the Bucs were more of a balanced offense. So it's not like we can really expect him to take Rachaad White off the field once they get into scoring position. So really Irving's impact is going to be, at least in my mind, somewhat minimal. Mm-hmm. That's the way I'm looking at it. That's the bet that I'm making when I'm drafting him, unless something unless there's an injury that occurs to Rachaad White. So I would say, at least at this point, his carry, White's carry share, should be fairly stable. It's just if he loses out on some of the passing down work, which is entirely possible. I've heard some glowing praise about Irving, through training camp. It's not like every day we're inundated with Irving's here, Irving's doing this, he's winning contested situations. We're not getting that. It's been more just a few pops here and there. So I still think White is somewhat accurately priced. There is some chance of him maybe losing a bit of value. But again, it's just if there are some concerns about Baker's efficiency in year 2 with the Bucs, and then that does lead to some overall deficient, like a lack of efficiency for the Bucs overall efficiency, like in like from a passing standpoint, and like their whole offense gets affected, then like does Rachaad White have lower value? That's where I think he might be somewhat overdrafted this year. It's like, well, people will just see the volume and just be like, yeah, I want to like sign me up for 2023 Rachaad White, and that's not going to be the case this year.
Yeah,
I agree, Steve.
You guys summed it up really nice. I'm just going to ride your coattails a little bit here. White's going as an RB 11 and 12 in drafts, ahead or around like players like Derrick Henry, James Cook. I'm not doing that. I am not doing that. As you guys already said, he was third in the NFL in rushing attempts, a couple carries away from CMC, and he had a 3.8 yards per carry. I'm not betting on somebody's volume. You know what I mean? So, and Chris said it, and this was an excellent point. If I can just land this airplane home here. This is a case of people in drafts. They're looking back at last year's stats, and they're drafting off of that. You can't always do that. You got to look at the circumstance. You got to look at the pretext, the subtext, context, everything around you, and just know that you're probably betting on regression unless the guy gets an incredible amount of workload. And historically speaking, we just don't see that in running backs anymore.
Yeah, I forget who said it, but it was an awesome saying. You want to draft next year's first round pick, not this year's, right? I mean, right? It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, solid. That was pretty good.
I forget who said it. I wish I could give him credit. It was I think I heard it on Sirius XM. So
I think I've heard Corain say that before. Or there's a Rich Rebar quote: "Skate to where the puck is going." So like if we already know that, or at least we're of the belief that the Bucs aren't going to be as potent of an offense as they were in 2023. Why should we go in that same? Why should we draft in that same direction?
Yeah.
Like why should we draft believing that Rachaad White, while he might get the volume, is still going to get like produce as well as he did last year, when we're already knowing that the puck is already moving in the opposite direction? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, makes perfect sense.
Good analogy.
All right, AJ.
All right. We are now moving on to the New Orleans Saints and Mr. Derek Carr. So we know that Carr played through some injuries last year, but assuming that he'll be back this year fully healthy, what are we looking at? What should we expect for this offense to be a little more generous when it comes to fantasy points? I mean, are we witnessing the end of Derek Carr? What are we making of this situation and Carr in general? Steve, we'll start with you.
Carr, it's probably about the same.
Yeah.
He's like mom's meatloaf. I'm not excited about it. I'll eat it. It's a Wednesday.
I like that.
Yeah.
Meatloaf, hey. But I'm not excited. I'm not thrilled by meatloaf.
The
throughout his career, we know the history of this guy. Yeah, Mom, meatloaf. We know the history of this guy. Carr's usually your 3 quarterback. We only look at in Superflex. It's not great. Tier 3-ish. I mean, he's better than the managers or the guys, the Zach Wilsons out there, but he's nothing exceptional to look at. He's middling. So I expect more of the same there. Now I will tell you, as a taxi stash, I kind of like Spencer Rattler a little bit. That 72% passer quarterback efficiency in college. He's probably have to clean up stuff like the blitzing, for the college phenoms out there. I kind of like that, but for this year, expect the same out of Carr.
Yeah. Chris, what do you think about the lipstick wearing pig?
Wow.
I thought you were going to say something else. I was like, man, Carr wears lipstick? Man, I thought he was kind of a religious dude. I can't see him really doing something like that. But no, like even for all of that, I mean, he was around like the 20th quarterback in terms of passing yardage per game. So really like Carr is just the delivery service so that we can get points to Chris Olave and like Rashid Shaheed and the rest of those guys. That's all we care about.
Yeah.
Right. That's all he's good for. Like you're not, if you are starting Derek Carr on your fantasy roster in the year 2024, I'm sorry. Like, I'm just saying it.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. I don't know what befell you. I don't know what bet you lost in order to get to that point. He only had 5 top 12 finishes last season. I mean, so it's like, I don't know like why you would put yourself in that position, other than like if you are starting like any of the other Saints pass catchers. But I think the only thing that I can kind of hang my hat on in terms of how we can, I guess, squeeze a bit more fantasy value out of him and the rest of the passing game, because it's already kind of bad, right? Like Ryan Ramczyk, like they're starting the offensive lineman like down for the season, which we already kind of knew at the beginning of the offseason, but then it was already confirmed. But they're 29th ranked offensive line. That's according to Brandon Thorne, who does work for Establish the Run. But I will say this. After getting rid of Pete Carmichael, their offensive coordinator that's been there for like almost 2 decades, if memory serves, they bring in Clint Kubiak, right? So, I mean, he was the San Francisco's like passing game coordinator. He worked worked when his dad was like out in Denver. He was out in Minnesota back in 2021. Like that was like when Justin Jefferson went off for like 1,400 yards. So it's like he's been able to engineer good offenses in the past. Now he's had better quarterbacks, obviously, other than that one year when he had like Russell Wilson as his quarterback in 2022 for Denver, which was like an absolute train crash. But he's been able to design like fairly legitimate offenses. So if I can at least tell myself a story of how drafting Chris Olave in the 2nd round or grabbing Rashid Shaheed in the 9th or 10th round, or drafting Taysom Hill for his bullshit that he does whenever he gets into the red zone, or Juwan Johnson, or any of those guys, right? If I'm going to tell myself a story about how that works out, it's because Clint Kubiak is the one pulling the strings.
Kamara,
versus
manager's most hated person ever.
Exactly. Like versus Pete Carmichael still being the one in charge, the same guy that was sending Chris Olave, like the guy that was, I mean, roasting cornerbacks like left, right, and center when he was at Ohio State, like from a zone perspective, but just having Chris Olave run wind sprints like down the field. And the motherfucker was still winning like on a week in, week out basis. So it's like if he can still win in that reality, what Clint Kubiak, what I'm assuming he's going to design up for him in this season, at least leads me to believe that Derek Carr has to be able to do something. He has to be able to feed the ball to Olave. You just get it to Olave, cool. You can huck the ball downfield to Rashid Shaheed, all right, fine. After that, you don't have to do anything else. You can complain about the play calling on the sideline. You can do whatever you want. Just throw the ball to those 2 dudes, and I'm good.
Yeah.
So who's the bigger ass? Taysom Hill or the tush push? I mean, they're kind of the same damn thing.
No, it's Taysom.
No, it's Taysom, dude.
Yeah, it's Taysom.
It's so awful.
It's Taysom. Because I hate it every time.
Yeah.
Because you're screwing over. Like, how many people get screwed over every time you see Taysom Hill come in? Because it's screwing over your, like, if you have Chris Olave on your roster, if you have Alvin Kamara on your roster, like multiple managers are getting screwed over every time Taysom Hill comes in. Because it's not like Taysom Hill's throwing it to somebody.
Well, that's what I'm saying. At least it was more of a. It was the tongue-in-cheek thing of ass and tush push.
Yeah.
But Taysom's definitely the answer. I agree.
Yeah.
I feel so bad.
I'll leave it as Steve's answers. Derek Carr, meh. We'll move on.
Yeah. I feel so bad for the Saints. They went from Drew Brees to Mom's Meatloaf. You know what I mean? Like
that sucks. And they're stuck with him. By his contract, they don't have it out until like 2026.
Oh. All right. So speaking of the weapons that they've got, Alvin Kamara, he was pretty damn good last year for a guy who a lot of people kind of were writing off, especially because of the suspension and all that stuff. Only played 13 games, and I've got the stats up here on the screen here, weeks 4 through 17. He was 2nd in running back targets, 1st in receptions, actually. Breece Hall was number 1 in targets. Kamara was number 2 at 86. McCaffrey was 3rd with 70. The big difference here is the touchdowns and the yards and all that stuff, because the offense just wasn't very good, obviously. But with that being said, knowing that he's got this production in him still, Chris, he's going to RB17 roughly around, in ADP. Is that a steal?
I can't. I can't. Because I already noted the offensive line concerns. So if we are dealing with a running back that is getting up there in age, we've noticed a drop in efficiency over the past couple of seasons. He's definitely not that same dude that scored six touchdowns on Christmas. Like he's not that guy anymore. So if I'm already looking at a running back that's diminished from a rushing perspective, I already noted like the change in offensive coordinator. Like I will at least, this is more narrative street than anything else. But let's say that Clint Kubiak doesn't want to target and use Alvin Kamara as a check down target, like in this particular offense. Let's say he wants to give more of those targets to Jawan Johnson, who's coming back from injury. Let's say he wants to bring in Chris Olave's average depth of target and have him like used more on screen passes than having Alvin Kamara be the guy that catches some of those check down targets. I mean, Alvin Kamara, he had 86 targets last season in 13 games, like you just mentioned. That's more targets than Curtis Samuel, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Cooks, Christian Kirk, Jahan Dotson. I can keep going on and on and on. He's a wide receiver like 2s and 3s. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So if I'm trying to picture what this new potential offense is going to look like this season, it involves like trying to see what these wide receivers can do, trying to, let's say, increase Chris Olave's route tree. Let's have him used more on slants, like the Michael Thomas of old. Let's have him on like more intermediate crossers. Let's see what Rashid Shaheed can do instead of him, putting him as your perimeter burner. And all that to say that if now we're seeing more of a diverse route tree from your primary pass catchers, and that's not even talking about Taysom and Jawan Johnson, that means less for Alvin Kamara. So for a guy that's made most of his bones on being a receiver, I can't project as much of that work for him this year in this new offensive system. He'll still be like 50, maybe like around 50 targets, but 50 ain't 86. Right. So if I can see like a few less targets coming his way, and I already have concerns about the rushing efficiency, I'm kind of out on him at cost.
Steve?
So I'm in, and here's why. There's a lot of jackassery on the Saints. You got Tyson Hill running around the field. We don't know what the heck he's doing. Mason Tipton, you heard that name before? He's already beaten out A.T. Perry. I don't know what that's about. Yeah. Juwan Johnson's hurt. You know, now Rachaad, he may be some value as a kick return with this new kick return punt rule. That might be something. But again, outside of Olive, I'm a little worried. Where's all this going to come from? And Kamara, this same statement, we had this last year too, if you remember. Kamara, everyone was worried about. You can get him late. Kamara finished as an overall RB5 on a per game basis last year. I get it. It's a whole new thing. I don't think that ADP is going to stay. I think come Labor Day weekend, I think he's going to go up a little bit. So just enjoy the discount now on the guy who can catch and run the ball. So a lot of jackassery there. I just can't call it. So I'm going to stay with him.
AJ, got any? I'll be honest. I'm sort of on the fence with Kamara. It's hard for me to pull the trigger on him.
Yeah, I haven't yet in any drafts. I've always seemingly liked other people that were around when I was potentially looking at maybe getting him, and then by the time my next turn came, he went. So, I wasn't crying over it. It's fine. I mean, maybe in like a best ball thing, take a stab if he falls, but even that I feel like could be risky. So I'm not sure if I can pull the trigger on it, especially if, like Chris was saying, if these receptions and targets are going to just drop way the hell down, then I'm out. Like I'm not interested in that. I'd rather try to get back to one of those actual receivers who's going to have more upside, on a per week basis. So overall, I don't love this offense. I'm interested to see what Kubiak can bring to it. Maybe he'll prove that he can be a success here as well. But TBD, and I'm just not sure I'm jumping on board yet.
He had some ridiculous receiving games, 14 targets twice. Like, what? That's just...
I don't. Yeah.
When
I was looking at those stats earlier today, before I said stuff over, I was like, this is just mind blowing. Like
that's like wide receiver 3 type numbers, like right there.
Dude, yeah, that's absolutely nuts. So
yeah.
All right, let's finish things off here, AJ.
All right, so we are finishing up here with Chris Olave. Clearly, he's the far and away wide receiver 1 on this offense. But his draft cost right now is around wide receiver 12 or 23rd overall. So basically, the end of the second round here. I mean, is that worth it in your eyes, or are you staying away from him this season, Steve?
So I'm reading the room right now, and I'm probably in the minority on this one. I'm just a wide receiver hater. I'm not staying away from him, but I've been wide receiver hating this whole podcast, okay? But I'm going to tell you why. He was wide receiver 16 last year, wide receiver 24 on a fantasy points per game basis with Carr. So I'm just saying it's a slight overpay. Now, if you do it, I get it. A touchdown here or there could put him in that category, especially best balls. Outside of that.
Okay. Chris, where are you at on Olave?
I think it's more about it's more of a structural thing for me. I'll say that, because I'm kind of with Steve, because all the wish casting that I just made, like to make the case for like how his route tree could change, his average depth of target could come down, because it was around like 14 yards last year, and there were only like, I think like 5 or 6 other receivers that had like a similar deployment. So it's like I like we're expecting all that to change, right? It's like we're expecting him to be like more like a 9, 10, 11 yard type of receiver. We're expecting him to get more screen passes. We're expecting him to run more slants, more short area type of stuff. Like all that is like how he has to win in order to make all that happen. But at the same time, it's like based off of ADP, could I just take Marvin Harrison Jr. instead and not have to worry about it? Could I take, I don't know, Jalen Waddle after him and not have to worry about it, even though he's kind of nicked up right now? But it's like there are other wide receivers. Yeah, it's like there are other wide receivers going around him that I don't have to do as much wish casting in order to see how they can outscore Chris Olave. So it's like if I have, let's say, the 108, 109, right? And I get like Garrett Wilson, or it used to be Puka Nacua, or AJ Brown. Let's throw AJ Brown in there. Let's say if I get one of those like strong wide receivers in the first, and I'm back around and he's still sitting there, could I pair him with one of those first round wide receivers that are still legitimate? Okay, fine. I can see myself doing that. That's absolutely fine. But let's say I still have the 107 or whatever, and I do like the Bijan Robinson or Breece Hall happens to fall into that neck of the woods in the first round, and I get Chris Olave as my wide receiver 1. I'm not feeling as confident, like in that particular structure. I kind of feel like I'm behind at wide receiver compared to if I were to pair him with another like early round wide receiver. So I think unless I need to see it in action, like I almost need to see like a preseason game. I need to see something about how, or read a bit more about how like he's being, put out there on the field, and what type of routes like him and Derek Carr are working on, pass game concepts, more play action, like any of that stuff to give me a better warm fuzzy about drafting Olave where he's currently at. Because right now it's just like all I can hope for is Derek Carr running for his life because the offensive line sucks, rolls out and hucks it deep, and Olave comes down with it. And that's a tough way to live, drafting a wide receiver in the second round.
Yeah. As somebody who had Olave a bunch last year, I was disappointed more than I was happy with the results I got. Even though it was okay.
The highlight was sick, right? Because when he comes down with the ball, it's like, oh, the body control. You see the contested catchability. You see all the things that we all saw when he was at Ohio State. But Absolutely. It's like, can I just get a couple of screen passes for the guy? Can I do that?
Can we just an easy one?
Can we just give him a layup? I just want that.
Yeah. Last time I checked, we didn't have a scoring category for awesome highlight reels, contested
that don't get you
catches,
extra points. Yeah.
And whatever else. it's all great. Like I enjoy watching it too as a football fan, and seeing the sheer strength that he has to fight off some of these tackles, and it's hard for me to pull the trigger on him, especially just because I don't trust Derek Carr. The meatloaf is not getting it done, and the sauce
that is now his new nickname.
The sauce on the side.
Yeah,
you got to go with that heavy ketchup. And
actually, AJ, you bring up a good point right there, and this is what. All right, for everybody listening right now, and AJ will give you credit, but next year, we should petition Scott Fish next year for the Scott Fish Bowl. Style points should be added to like the scoring settings for SFB. What would be SFB was 15, 16 for next year, whatever
15,
it is.
15.
Yeah, 15. Yeah, SFB 15, whatever the theme is, because they're gonna come up with some wild theme. But everybody should just go and like style points. I don't like it could be completely qualitative, but if the shit looks cool, we should get extra points for that.
I'll do you one better.
Be like the wide receiver one.
It's now going to be deemed, and I will coin this and send it to Scott myself. Scott Fishbowl Quinceañera, nice. And the style points will come into play, at the live DC draft, because when I went to DC a couple months back on a family trip, took our girls down there and doing some sightseeing and whatnot. There was a quinceañera like party at I can't remember which monument it is, if it's the World War II monument where they have all the state. No, maybe it was a different one, but they have all the state things in that little reflecting pool thing. Yeah, they were like out there taking pictures, and like, I mean, this girl was out owning, modeling. Like it was impressive. The style points that were going out on this party. So that's what we're looking for.
Those are going to have to be added after the fact too. Like, how you get the like the points. What's it called? Like when they get corrected.
Oh,
like, can you imagine all of a sudden, like the very next day, you're like, you got to earn 10 points. What the hell?
Yeah,
that corrections are going to be absurd.
That corrections next day.
Yeah, that'd be.
MFL can handle it though. They're going to totally break it down
in there on MFL.
To Joe's point, like Hawk Tua, that'd be like 100 points, and like a week later, like we're sick of hearing this. You're getting negative too.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm with.
All right, let's finish the show up here and get into our wild card players. And so, for those of you that are listening for the first time, and Chris and Steve also, what we like to do here is ask you who your wild card player of this division is. And this there's a lot of definitions, but the way I kind of go about it for myself, at least, is somebody who's got like a wide range of outcomes. So somebody who's getting drafted in a position where they're risky enough in a good way where like they can outperform it big time and be like a league winner, or it's risky enough because they could also severely bust and like blow up your team. So Chris, we will start with you.
I mean, if thinking about it from that perspective, I mean, it's got to be one of the guys on the Panthers, just because I think the Panthers as a whole, if you're investing in that team from Bryce Young, like all the way down, I mean, any player on that roster has a chance to really be like great at their position. I think outside of Diontae Johnson, but we already talked about him. But outside of him, any one of those guys like has a chance to be like really awesome for your team, or they could just be that guy that's just like, oh, I'm just going to put him on waivers and we're going to act like we didn't draft him anymore. But if I'm gonna put any of them on there,
what happened was
exactly.
Yeah.
If I'm going to put any of them on there, I'll put Leggett on there. Just because him coming out of college as raw as he was, and we've seen we've heard like inklings of that, like coming out of training camp where it's, I mean, you can see the athletic ability like there, like with him. And because like he's being drafted where he's at, like I've seen him go in like at least on Underdog, like around in like the 10th, 11ish round, if memory serves. But either way, it's like, could he be the guy that can wind up being like, I almost liken him to, could he be like the Christian Watson, like for the Panthers, where he's that guy that's streaking down the field, like working like the deep crossers, creating explosives down the field and like scoring a touchdown, like, off a Bryce Young pass. Like, could that be Leggett like in 2024? I think there's a potential for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Diontae Johnson operating like the intermediate parts of the field, Adam Thielen kind of doing his like old man thing, and so on and so forth. Like, I can see Leggett like being that guy. Or could he just be a guy like him being so raw, he needs an extra year to really kind of understand not just the tendencies of the NFL, but of his like short statured quarterback and how to operate like in that particular scheme. Yeah. I can see that happening as well. So from a guy that, could be like, he could completely like hop up in value, and we're all going to be like, oh, we saw the athleticism. We knew this could happen. Like, Panthers have taken that step, and like, the second year leap for Bryce Young, all those things to, oh yeah, like they need more time to gel, and they need Jonathan Brooks, and they need all this other stuff. I can see that happening as well. So I think Leggett is kind of the guy for me, the wild card for me.
All right, Steve.
Man, there are so many great candidates. I mean, Pitts screams,
right?
Willie Woney. And I mean, for all the aforementioned reasons, we covered all these guys. I'm actually going to I'll give you two. I'll give you Godwin or White. They're both overly efficient last season because of their volume. But, you take that away, I mean, they're in line to repeat their workload. But if you take that away, I mean, their projections are like whoopee cushions right now. We don't know if it's going to go off or, if somebody's going to fart in the seat. We just don't know the range on both of those guys. So give me Godwin or White.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. AJ, who's yours?
Man, I was leaning the Bucks as well. I'm actually going to go Mike Evans. We didn't talk about Evans at all tonight, but I think, it's kind of, he's more my 1A. It's really Baker, because it starts with him. If he ends up, showing up and doing even similar to what he did last year, maybe not peaking with that. If that's his ceiling and he's right under that, what you're getting out of Evans. He's going to have a great year again. Godwin should excel, as we talked about, and, get back to form. I like McMillan a lot as well as their third receiver. I love him in Dynasty. I'm trying to grab him up where I can, because Mike Evans is getting older. He's eventually, I think, going to slow down. But I think this offense is very similar to the Panthers. I think this is going to be an interesting division where it's going to be really knock down, drag them out, good matchups within the division against each other. But I think whoever is going to come out on top, I think it's going to depend on Baker and Evans. If that connection that they had last year is still as strong, it's going to be big for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So mine's going to be Drake London. And as much as I am optimistic about him, I am also terrified that we are overpaying for him. I mean, look, we are still drafting him over guys who have done it before, right? Yeah. Mike Evans, we are still drafting him over Mike Evans, right? We are drafting him over Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins, Deebo Samuel, like ton of guys who have outperformed him. And recently. So, yes, everything points in the direction that Drake London can do this. Everything points in the direction that Kyle Pitts can do this, right? We haven't seen it yet. So there is like this whole Atlanta offense really in general is being drafted very high under the assumption that it's all just going to get corrected because Arthur Smith and isn't there, and they brought in Kirk Cousins. I mean, that's a lot of hope, and that's two factors that like may not have been the problem, right? So who knows? We'll have to. Hopefully, we're right, because I'm kind of buying into it myself, but I think there is that risk that Drake London is good, and this offense is just kind of flop. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a first-round pick next year, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's got that talent. Yeah. So there we go. All right, that is it for the show, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Before we let you guys go, Chris and Steve, just let everybody know where they can find you and what you got going on the season. Chris, we'll let you go first.
Sure. First and foremost, I appreciate y'all having me on tonight. And AJ, 2025 beers, you and me.
Absolutely.
JB, Steve.
I'll have a lot of catching up to do.
Oh yes.
Put in
Friday
your vacation
night.
time now, AJ.
Yeah. Friday night. Joe, I already gave you my number, man. We'll connect once everybody gets
Absolutely.
in. But no, if y'all want to find like more of my content, you can find it over at Fantasy Life, fantasylife.com. Free newsletter out like every morning. I'm like the YouTube live shows that we got going on right now. I'm on Mondays and Wednesdays with Ian Harditz. Draft kit out right now, going through my draft series, like picking from like every single draft slot, like 1 through 12, and walking through like different strategies using some of our tools. And just waiting for the season to start, which is going to be a wild and crazy ride. But no, man, let's take this weekend to have a little bit more fun, and then after that, we'll have a grind time for the next like 6 months. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it.
So Steve, before you go, Jamie's got a question. He's on the clock, 2.06. He's got London, Puka, or reach on Henry. He's already drafted Chase. Who you go? Steve?
I mean, it's really a dealer's choice for you, but I mean, I like a Puka. I like a Henry. I'm a little lenient on the line.
I think I'm going Puka myself.
Mm-hmm.
We interviewed the Rams guy today. It hasn't been published yet on YouTube, but he said that there's really no worry with Puka that he'll be back.
Yeah, assuming it's 1 point PPR, you're all set. Why not suck up those wide receivers early?
Chris, you agree?
Yeah, 100% agree. And actually, there's a chance that the Rams could be more pass heavy once they get into the red zone. Their injuries to their offensive line, what Rob haven't seen, and like whomever, I think they have 2 offensive linemen currently out injured. And last year, they had their lowest pass rate over expectation in the red zone since Matthew Stafford joined the Rams. So if that even comes back to neutral, that could be more volume for all the wide receivers.
Yeah,
especially
I mean, he's got a point though. You can pass Puka and get Cup around later.
I responded in the chat. I told him I was thinking Henry because I'm a little partial to Henry, but
I can't see him not going off this year. Ravens
Henry
offense,
would be my second choice. But Puka's
I said Henry or Puka, but it depends on Puka's injury, how long he's going to be out. So he said that he was thinking Henry because our 7 running backs already went. Was hoping for JT or Barkley. So at that point,
there you go.
Said it's underdog, so half PPR.
Yeah.
All right. So Steve, let you have the floor. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Right. Yeah, I write over here at the Fancy Six Pack and also at the RPO Network. Nobody cares about my offense, so thank you guys for listening to me tonight, AJ, Joe, Chris. You can find my rookie offense and my articles over at the IDPcenter.com. Of course, I do a couple podcasts here at Fancy Six Pack and the RPO Network. Last but not least, I'll be at the Expo. Anybody wants to say hi to me, whatever. I will be Friday night at the poker table drinking beers. I won't be playing poker. I got a couple buddies in that tournament, high stakes. Nice. I don't have money like that. I'm married. I got kids. I got to save the pennies and take my lunch. So I'll be watching though. But if anybody wants to stop, say hi, go right ahead. But that's where you guys can find me. And of course on Twitter, IDP Hunter.
Cool. All right. Thanks guys for tuning in, and see both of you just a couple days.
Yep.
Heck yeah.
All right. Sorry, I won't get to see you guys in person in a couple of days, but soon enough.
Yes. See you guys. Have a good one.
Right, thanks for jumping on.
All right, AJ. I think that's it for the show. We're gonna be finishing up next Thursday with our last one of these. Got a couple good guests here. Let me find it out. So we got Marcus Grant and Chris Robin jumping in next Thursday for this one. So that'll be
heavy hitters. All right.
That'll be actually it's next Wednesday. I forgot that one's actually a Wednesday.
Yeah, we moved that
because you had to move it, right?
Yeah.
So that one's next Wednesday. So a lot of Wednesday shows this off season, it feels like. But all right, so that is it for the show. I want to thank you all for listening and watching. We will see you next time.